most important part of when we return back to school. Please say it with me. Wash your hands. Okay? Everybody cool? That's what we're going to do?
Wash your hands.
Your hands. Thank you. All right.
Wash your hands.
Antibiotics. The bacteria that cause diseases are called pathogens. Our immune system, or other bacteria in our body, are in charge of protecting us against them. However, sometimes it is necessary to take medicines like antibiotics.
Go ahead and share what are two things that they learned about bacteria after watching the video, all right? Again, remember, we're trying to earn PBIS points. Kendall, what's two things you learned?
Two things that I learned is that they can spread from water, wind, and cough, and also they are all around the environment that we live in, or other places.
Thank you. So right, everywhere, right? And they both can make grow. Two some things that they learned watching the video. Take a few more before we move on. So again, I know Kendall's trying to earn his PBIS points because he answered. Who else is trying to get these easy points today? All you have to do is share two things that you wrote down or noticed in the video. And again, I see a lot of us whose cameras are off, and it's going to be really, really hard for you guys to earn your points. And I'd like to make a reminder that we are having our Valor reports are going out, and on the Valor report is the amount of points that you're earning, right? So you don't want to get bad reports because you don't have your cameras on and you're not participating in class. Samaj, you want to go ahead and share?
I learned what antibiotics are and that it's good to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't write a lot of stuff down, but I learned bacteria is all over your body.
Exactly, it's all over our body. Right? Thank you. Great job. And Isaiah, can you be our last one, please?
What'd you say again?
Were you raising your hand?
No.
There you go. And then Dania said that bacteria have different shapes, and she also learned that it can be found anywhere in the planet. Also, antibiotics are good for you. Cool, thank you. So, as we continue to learn about different things that bacteria can do, we learn that there are not just harmful, but there's also very, very many positive benefits, that come from bacteria. We're going to continue to move on. All right, so like I talked about in our reading or in the video, we learned that bacteria is unicellular. All right, so this is something that we want to make sure that we're putting down under our notes section under bacteria. We want to put that bacteria is unicellular, right? And we know that it's unicellular because bacteria has all the characteristics of life. All right. So need everybody to make sure we're putting that in our notes under our notes section. It should be right under our topic bacteria. And we know that bacteria are unicellular organisms because they have all the characteristics of life by themselves. It doesn't need other cells to have all the characteristics of life. So because they have all the characteristics of life, if they're called organisms, can they live independently? Do you think they can live independently? Go ahead and send me in the chat. Do you think that they can live independently if they have all the characteristics of life? I see O'Malley in the chat. Yep. Trayshawn in the chat. Thank you, Nishida. I see that thumbs up. Ariana, Delana. Exactly, right? So because they are unicellular and because it has all the characteristics of life in that one cell, bacteria can live individually by itself. The crazy thing about bacteria, though, is even though it lives by itself and it doesn't need other cells, it replicates so fast. It makes so many different ones, right? It continues to reproduce. So that's why we have so many trillions and trillions of bacteria all throughout our world. All right. All right. A thumbs up, and everybody has these notes, and they're ready to move on. Thank you, Trayshawn. See somebody still writing them down. Michael, you got these? You good? Okay. Elena, you good? You ready to move on? You still write them down. Delana, you good? Okay. Miss Trin, you got these notes? All right, great. So, next thing we're going to do is, in the video, we talk a lot about how the evidence of life, or the evidence of bacteria, is shown through food, right? So we know that bacteria is used to make food. So, for example, we have Swiss cheese. It's made by adding bacteria to cheese. So bacteria eats the lactic acid, or the lactate, which is basically the enzyme that's in milk, and it eats it and it gives off other bacteria, right? So when it does that, the bacteria then gives off the waste, or exchanges the waste for gas, or as gas, or CO2. So since we know that, oh no, sorry, I was trying to let one of your friends in and skip the page. But since we know that bacteria can exchange gas, and we know that it's a living thing, one of the characteristics of life are the exchanging of gases, right? So it exchanges CO2, and it releases that, and it allows us to have what we eat, which is cheese. So essentially, I know it sounds nasty, but cheese is like mold. But I mean, it's good tasting mold to some people. Some people don't like it. All right, so can you think of some other types of food that may be made with bacteria? If cheese is one of the foods that's made with bacteria, can we think of some other types of food that may be made with bacteria? See, some burgers, some soup. Okay. All right, and a little later on, I'm gonna give you guys the opportunity to research and tell me how accurate some of these guesses are, right? Like whether soup really is, or whether burger is. I mean, a cheeseburger, technically, if you put cheese on top of the burger because it's moldy. But okay. All right. Did you don't like Swiss cheese? All right. So next thing I want us to do is, under our vocab, I know that we have we're going to talk a little bit about bacterial organelles and functions, right? So we're going to stop my screen real quick. And I want everybody to have somebody raise their hand and go back to our notes and remind me what is an organelle. So we should be back in our notes and can remind me what is an organelle. Samaj is handed up. Samaj, I really want to call on you, but you've been on it all day. So it looks like you're really trying to earn those 7 PBIS points today, because you've really been killing it. But I wanted to have one more person I haven't heard from today. Duchess, can you tell me what an organelle is?
An organelles are the structure inside cells that have different jobs.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So organelles are the structures inside cells that have different jobs. So I know when we're talking about cells, we usually learn about plant cells, we learn about animal cells. But today we're going to see what structures are in organelles are inside bacterial cells. All right. Why is it sharing? Okay, that's weird. Sorry, guys. Trying to get this tech stuff going. Just, for whatever reason, not good at tech. It's okay. All right. Okay, cool. So when we talked about the different type of organelles that are inside of plant and animal cells, we learned about the cell membrane, which is inside animal cells. We learned about the cell wall, which is inside of plant cells. We learned about the cytoplasm, which is also inside of plant cells. We learned about DNA. We learned all those different things. But one of the organelles that are inside of plant cell or inside of bacterial cells are plasmids, right? So this is something that I want us to put down in our vocabulary, right? So plasmids are circular pieces of DNA and ribosomes that float on the cell, which does not have a nucleus, right? So an easier way to say that is that small pieces of genetic material that is independent of other DNA in the cell that can be passed to other bacteria. So small pieces of genetic material that is independent of other DNA in the cell that can be passed to other bacteria. Take some time to write down those notes. And one thing that is important to know is that bacterial cells do not have a nucleus. So I remember last one, I think it was Tuesday, when I asked what was the difference between bacterial cells and plant and animal cells. And the biggest difference between the two, because I told you we're going to figure that out later, is that bacterial cells do not have a nucleus. Animal cells and plant cells both have nucleus. All right, so we're going to always circle back. We want to make sure that while we're doing our entire diversity of life investigation, we always want to be able to circle back to our characteristics of life list, all right? Because no matter what, we always want to be able to make sure that things are living, or to be able to determine whether something is living or whether something is non-living, okay? So, can I have us in the chat remind me, what is our first characteristic of life? Who remembers what our first characteristic of life is? Everybody type it in the chat. Thank you, Logan. Come on, I need to see some more participation. We was all participating. We was saying what we was doing this weekend. Thank you, Samaj, Trayshawn. Looking for a few more. Come on now. What is our first characteristic of life? Thank you so much. So the first one is that it grows. Remember that we'll always have to remember it as it grows. So when we're thinking about bacteria, can bacteria grow? We saw it. We learned that bacteria does grow and multiply, right? The next thing that we know, what is our second characteristic of life, right? So we should all have these notes down. Our second characteristic of life needs energy. Thank you so much, Logan. It needs energy. So we know that bacteria also needs energy in order for it to grow, okay? The next thing that we talked about is that it needs water. Thank you, Trayshawn. So it needs water. So again, if you do not have these, please make sure you have these. This is going to be, we're always going to refer back to our characteristics of life list every time that we're talking, like every time we end an investigation, okay? Next one is, thank you, Samaj, exchanges gases. So we learned that it does exchange gas, right? So when we saw that cheese, when it reduces or exchanges the CO2, that is the exchange of gas, all right? Next thing is also that it can eliminate waste. We know that bacteria does eliminate its waste. The sixth one is that it reproduces. We know about reproduction. Someone needs a suitable living environment. Responds to the environment. And most importantly, well, not most importantly, but lastly, it is made of cells. All right? So, here's what I need us all to do right now. Because now that we know about our characteristics of life, it is time to climb. So have everybody please go ahead and log in to Nearpod. Okay, so we should all be at nearpod.com.